3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Welcome to Roots of Reality. I'm your host, Ben Baumann, and today I'm going to be talking about the final phase of this part of the podcast series, and that is Phase 19, the modern world and what to make of it. So now we have finally gone through all of the different phases of the history of existence from the formation of the universe to the present and have reached today. How this era was shaped, though, was due to a few major world-changing events. And this new age really had its origins going back to the 1970s when, during the Cold War, the foundations of a new tool that would completely change human history would be created. And this creation was the internet, created by the Americans Vinton Cerf and Robert Kahn. And by 1992, the English computer scientist Tim Berners-Lee would create the World Wide Web and create the first web browser ever. So from here, the world would change drastically, leading to the creation of social media, news organizations moving online, and the internet becoming the main resource of information for most of the world. Then, in the 21st century, our species would also make more progress in space science, with the Americans discovering water on Mars and the moon, and with astronomers all over the world identifying many planets beyond our solar system that could potentially have life on them. Also, the European Space Agency would determine that the age of the universe is 13.8 billion years old. Also, in terms of genetics, we learned much more about the history of our species through genetic analysis via the Genographic Project run by the American scientist Spencer Wells. And also, we would discover the ability to edit the DNA of organisms. So now we have finally reached our moment in time, the present. We are living on one planet, in one solar system, in one galaxy, in a universe that we barely understand. However, countless planets, solar systems, and galaxies exist in our universe. And beyond our universe could exist countless more universes for all that we know. So though we really don't know much about our universe, and there could be many more things going on beyond our little world that we live in, we have, over the 300,000 years of our species' existence, learned quite a bit about our own planet, Earth. For instance, our planet is about 71% water and about 29% land. And of that water on our planet, only about 2.5% is drinkable. When it comes to life on our planet, there are about 10 million species of life. However, we have only identified and named 1.9 million of them. So most of life that exists on our planet, we have yet to discover. However, out of all life that has ever existed on our planet, 99.9% has gone extinct. Thus, we are among the 10 million different species alive today that make up the 0.1% that still exists. Now, when examining human societies around the world, there are almost 8 billion people on the planet, and 60% of all people live in Asia, more specifically the countries of India and China, which make up 35% of the world's entire population. However, China has the most people in the world, followed by India, who is in close second, and third is the United States of America. Next, around the world, about 140 million people are born every year, and each year around 60 million people also die. In fact, the most common cause of death among our species is heart disease, which kills nearly 10 million a year, and the average global lifespan for a human being is about 73 years old. Therefore, with that in mind, the average 25-year-old has already lived 34% of their life. So just take a moment to think about that. 34% of your life, if you're 25, is gone forever, with only an average of 48 years left to live. Now, as for countries, there are 194 countries around the world that are recognized by everyone. There are also 5 significant wars going on around the world today, with civil wars in South Sudan, Libya, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Syria. In terms of language, English is the most spoken language on the planet, spoken by nearly 17% of all people. In the world, though, there are a little over 7,000 languages spoken. However, many are going extinct, and many are spoken by less than 100,000 people. As for religion, Christianity is still the most popular religion, representing 31% of the world, and Islam is second, representing 24% of the world. And as for education, 86% of the human population can read and write. Next, the wealthiest nation in the world is the United States of America. And the United States of America has the largest economy in the world with a GDP, gross domestic product, of $21 trillion. China has the second largest economy with a GDP of $14 trillion. In addition, the most influential nation in the world is also the United States of America, which as a nation has produced the most world-changing innovations in the modern world, dominating the late 20th century and the early 21st century. Also, the United States of America has the most dominant culture in the world when it comes to their entertainment industry and companies abroad. However, today, China for the first time now leads the world in international patent applications. And the international patent application just means a person has applied to get the international right to be the only one who could produce the product that they invented. Now, this is China's first time leading the world in this category, as I've just stated. And before this, the United States of America was leading this every year that this category was calculated. Still, though, the US is a very close second behind China in this category. But China could potentially become a new leader of innovation if they're able to continue this trend going on into the future. As for military strength, the United States of America is the most powerful nation in the world. The United States has the strongest air force with a total of 2,000 combat aircraft. China is second with about 1,200. In terms of ground warfare capabilities, when it comes to tanks and armored vehicles, the US leads the world with about 39,000, and China has the second most with 33,000. However, Russia leads the world in terms of artillery and rocket projectors, with over 10,000 pieces of artillery and nearly 4,000 rocket projectors. China is second with about 7,400 pieces of artillery and about 2,600 rocket projectors. Then when it comes to naval power, the US is again the most dominant with 20 aircraft carriers, and Japan and France are tied for second with 4. The US also has the most destroyer ships with 91, and Japan is in second with 40. And in terms of military spending, the US also leads the world with about $750 billion a year spent on their military, while China comes in second with about $237 billion spent. Then, in terms of oil production, a critical resource due to the military dependency on oil around the world, Russia leads the world producing about 10.6 million barrels a day. Saudi Arabia is second, producing 10.1 million, and the US is third, producing 9.3 million. Finally, when thinking about military bases around the world, the US is the leader with bases in various countries on every inhabited continent, and has way more total bases than any other country in the world. In fact, the US military is operating to a certain extent in 40% of the world's nations. As for other countries, France and Britain are second in terms of having bases abroad, but still are nowhere near to the level of the United States military's operations around the world. Thus, with all this in mind, the US continues to dominate in the modern world in terms of military power. Now, when examining the quality of life around the world, when it comes to the average household income after taxes per year, the US leads the world with about $45,000. Second is Luxembourg with about $39,000, and third is Switzerland with about $37,000. When considering local purchasing power, meaning how much you can get for your money in your own country, Switzerland is number 1, Qatar is number 2, and the United States of America is number 3. However, when it comes to the cost of living, Switzerland is far more expensive than both these nations. Now focusing on basic necessities for life, about 85% of the world has electricity today. This is an improvement from 1994 when only 75% of the world had electricity. Also, about 30% of the world does not have clean drinking water. This again is an improvement over the year 1990, where about 40% didn't have clean drinking water. Next, about 11% of the world is suffering from hunger. In 1990, 19% were suffering from hunger. Also, about 10% of the world lives in extreme poverty. In 1990, this was 36%. So many things are getting better in this regard. Now focusing on the governments of various independent nations or territories around the world, about 40% only have true democracies, which is a slight increase from earlier years. The other 60% are either complete dictatorships or only partly have democracy. Thus, even in the modern world today that we are living in, the denying of basic freedoms around the world so corrupt government officials can get rich and protect their authoritarian regimes continues to be an ongoing issue. Because narcissistic dictators suffering from fragile egos continue to oppress people because they fear their citizens who are victims of their actions could eventually hold them accountable for their criminal actions. Despite all this, though, we have been seeing a common trend where life is getting better for the average person on the planet, which is a great thing to see as throughout human history, things continue to get better and better. In addition to all these issues I've just mentioned going on around the world, societies also still have other problems going on. For example, poor healthcare system, too much access to illegal and dangerous drugs, violent gang activity, and also there are still various inequalities due to corruption or just discrimination. So though things are getting better, there are still several societal problems that need to be addressed. In turn, when it comes to the other problems facing our species as a whole on Earth, there are several things happening right now as you're listening to this podcast. First, there is a major problem developing in the natural world. You see, historically devastating natural phenomena have caused various extinctions throughout the history of Earth. But never before has a major extinction event been caused by a particular species. This could change soon, though, as we are the most advanced species ever in our planet's history, and recently we've become so advanced we could cause another mass extinction event. For instance, right now, due to human activities on the planet, we could cause the extinction of as many as 50% of all species on Earth by around 2050, according to the latest scientific estimates. The cause of this is due to a number of factors. For example, we are rapidly destroying forests around the world, in turn destroying the homes of various species. In addition, some species are being hunted too much. And most importantly, we are polluting our environment too much, which is poisoning water sources around the world, making the air we and other species breathe more toxic, and is affecting the weather as well, causing the average temperatures around the world to increasingly get warmer. This is all because our industries and transportation systems release gases in the air from their use of fossil fuels, and these gases absorb all heat that is produced on our planet. This heat normally would just go into space, but instead these gases clog up our atmosphere, preventing the heat from leaving the Earth, and instead forces it back to Earth, increasing temperatures over time. So eventually, if we don't do something, human societies around the world will also be greatly harmed by this, forcing many to migrate to safer parts of the world, in addition to this mass extinction of various species on our planet. Now, can these things be prevented? Yes, but the more we delay, as our species tends to do in these situations, the harder it will be to control the problem. Also, it is possible we could get lucky and this issue won't happen as soon as scientists think it will, since we are, after all, human and prone to making errors when it comes to scientific estimates. However, this is eventually going to be a problem, and we will have to address it soon rather than later, because if we wait too long, the problem could get out of control, and it could be too late. Now, moving on to a different issue that's going on in the world that people don't necessarily pay enough attention to is the issue of slavery. Though slavery is banned officially in all nations today, it is still present all over the world, and there are about 27 million slaves in the world today. Modern slavery is often occurring in various forms, but the two major ones are sex slavery or labor-based slavery. The next issue, and a very relevant issue today, are pandemics. And now people are starting to realize that the concept of a pandemic is not a problem of the past, but of the present, and will continue to be in the future. In fact, there are way more viruses lurking among life on Earth than there are stars in the universe. And there will always be new viruses occurring or changing in a way so that they can infect our species. And in an increasingly globalized world where everyone is connected, it is much easier to spread these viruses all over the planet. In addition, due to the habitat loss of animals, animals are also more likely to come into contact with people, thus increasing the chances of animals spreading viruses to us. Then there are also ongoing issues involving nuclear weapons, which has been a problem since the Cold War. There are 9 countries today on the planet with nuclear weapons, including the United States of America, Britain, France, Israel, Pakistan, India, Russia, China, and North Korea. So though humanity has avoided nuclear war before, as long as these weapons exist, they are always a threat to the survival of our species. Then, further off into the future, there are new potential issues we will need to keep an eye on as well, including our dependence on fossil fuels, which is what, as I mentioned earlier, industries around the world and transportation depend on, because this is a limited resource that will eventually run out. So we need to be able to ensure that we have a new resource that we can depend on. Also, overpopulation could be a problem in the future, since our population is limited by the amount of resources we have to survive, and if we are not careful, it is possible for us to not have enough resources in the future to take care of the increasing global population. In addition, we will need to be careful about the potential dangers of other things like artificial intelligence, because there could be countless consequences as we get closer and closer to developing it. We also must be aware that the ability to produce bioweapons, for instance, creating a virus in a lab, for example, is no longer in the realm of science fiction. Overall, though, in the big picture, all of these problems are solvable. But first we must address what's really beneath the surface the biggest problem facing human societies today. And that is learning to seek the truth as a species to solve these complex problems together by overcoming our differences when it comes to ethnicity, nationality, religion, or political views. Because ultimately, no matter our differences, we have more in common than not, and we can't afford to not work together. These are global issues, and they're not going away. In today's world, though, unfortunately, we are seeing more and more toxicity in how people communicate with those they don't agree with, especially when it comes to complicated issues that don't have clear solutions, when we as people naturally want to assume there are always easy solutions to a problem. In fact, since the dawn of the internet, never before has it become so easy for people to find information that confirms exactly what they want to believe, regardless of whether it's true or not, because people are more likely to seek out information that they want to hear. And the media around the world especially takes advantage of this. It takes advantage of these human biological urges to hear what you want, and the media profits off of them, whether financially or politically, via the constant promotion of stories that can take advantage of our human biases, regardless of how misleading the media's representation of that story may be. Or even worse, it could just be completely false. Thus, the irony of the internet is that it can be a great tool, but at the same time serves as a propaganda machine, where people segregate themselves into these little virtual communities online that in reality are just biased echo chambers. This is especially true when it comes to the enormous amount of pseudo-history, pseudoscience, conspiracies, and just general false information that lives and thrives all over the internet, which unfortunately makes it harder for many people to find the truth in this world and to determine what's fact from fiction. Because ultimately, people do care about knowing the truth. It's just that it's easier to just spend a few minutes reading something that you already think to be true, regardless if it is or not. Because getting the actual truth is far more complex, and it requires far more effort. because nothing in this world is just easily understandable. Therefore, it is sad because it doesn't have to be this way. After all, these little internet communities are ultimately just social constructions. In fact, so are the political parties people support, as well as the nations we live in. They only exist in our heads because we all agree they exist. But in reality, like the money we carry around with us, it only means something because we say it does. So if people can learn to actively compromise with each other, despite their differences, we can solve the world's problems. Unfortunately, there's a feeling among many that compromise is not progress, when historically compromise is often a huge driver of progress. In fact, our whole life is based around compromise. We make compromises every day with family, friends, and coworkers because no one agrees on absolutely everything, and compromise is critical to success and preserving a healthy social life with the people you care about. Consequently, as societies, and most importantly as one species, we need to quit looking at each other as enemies, fighting each other over biased, unproven ideologies and theories, and start seeking common ground based on the general consensus of evidence, based on what experts say, and come together, because we only hurt ourselves more as a global society if we don't, and because reality doesn't care about what you want to be true. Thus, at the end of the day, our whole survival as a species historically has been about and will continue to be about overcoming challenges by working together and putting aside the differences that don't really matter at the end of the day between each other. So this is the world we live in. It continues to improve as a whole, as I mentioned earlier, and as individuals in this modern world, never before has there been more opportunities for the average person to do what they want with their lives. Everyone comes from different backgrounds. And surely, everyone has different opportunities and experiences and countless factors that play a role in how their life develops. But still, regardless of all those things, this is the best era in history overall, to be alive for the average person globally. So challenges remain, but progress has been made and hopefully will continue to be made. So lastly, before I finish this episode, I just want to give one statement in the big picture about life and just trying to make sense of our existence in this mysterious universe that we live in today. So you see, right now in this moment, you are the result of 13.8 billion years of history and 300,000 years of human history. We are just one species of animal that exists on our planet that is dependent on using energy from natural resources for survival. And at the fundamental level, we ourselves are no more than just energy flowing through matter. What's amazing though about this is that if you think about all the things that had to happen in the 13.8 billion years of history for you to exist today, for example, the universe beginning just in the first place, our planet forming in just the right place in our solar system to be able to support life, our species forming in the genetic lottery that is evolution, and our human ancestors surviving various plagues and wars and having children with all the right people, and our parents just happening to meet each other to create you and I. When you think about this, it is the equivalent of winning the lottery countless times in a row. In turn, this is your reality, and what you make of it is up to you. The meaning of your life is yours to decide. This is the gift you are born with. So don't ever be afraid of becoming what you dream of being, because ultimately, whatever you dream of can't be crazier than the fact that you even exist in the first place. And no matter what happens, no matter how bad it gets, no amount of bad will ever take away the good moments that matter most. However, at the same time, we also have to keep in mind that our biological clocks are always running out of time, since we were essentially born to die, and every hour, minute, and second is one that you and I will never get back. All you have to do is just think about your loved ones that have died, who were once in your shoes, once feeling like they too had plenty of time. And then understanding, looking back at their lives, knowing how quickly that goes by. As a species, we often try to ignore that fact of life, the fact that we will die. For many, it is scary, but ironically, it is death that also gives our lives meaning. Death is what makes every moment count, since if you lived forever in this world, nothing would ever matter, because you'd always have time. Every day as people, we often look for motivation to do all those things that you think about doing growing up, or that you think about doing once you graduate from college, or that you think about doing once you start looking for that next job. And it can be hard because there's so many things that can distract us and take our time away from focusing on that big question. What's next with my life? What am I going to do next? But ultimately, when you think about it, what more motivation do you need than the fact that you are dying? So here's your chance to write your chapter in the history of our universe. A chapter that future generations will look back on and ask themselves, what did the people of this moment in history do to make this world better? Or take it even further, your descendants or future relatives that you might have are going to look back and say, what did my ancestor do with their lives? So the question is, will you take your moment for granted? A moment countless people who could have potentially been born would have had if history unfolded differently. If your ancestors never would have met, or if your mom and dad never would have met, someone else would be here, not you. Regardless though, no matter what one chooses to do with their lives, our fates will ultimately all be the same at the end of the day when we die. Since scientifically based on the second law of thermodynamics, at the very least, the energy that once made up who we are will forever remain in our universe, since energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So, I'd like to thank you all for listening. Enjoy life as much as you can, seek the truth, and do your best to follow what is most likely to be true based on evidence by embracing the complex reality of our world, instead of fearing it and trying to simplify it. The wisest thing that we can do is accept the fact that we have to carefully look at the evidence to determine what is most likely correct in this world, and admit that we don't know everything. And even then, as more evidence comes out about a topic in the future, as these things always tend to do, what's correct might change. And we have to be prepared and open to that change. And we all need to forgive each other for mistakes and don't take disagreements personally. After all, we are all just people trying to make sense of this mysterious existence, and life is too short to obsess too much over the past. Because when we're in our final moments of life, no one's going to be thinking about those disagreements, but they're going to think about what they wish they would have done to make things better. If we can keep this perspective in mind, going through life, we can make this world better together. And if you ever need a reminder of just how lucky you are to be here right now in this moment, just go outside and look up at that night sky and see those stars. And remember, this incredible, mysterious universe is your home. So cherish it and protect it. As always, remember, billions of years led to you, so make the most of it.